Welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the law firm of Abercrombie and Sanchez, PLLC. You can find us on the internet at astxlegal.com or by calling 1-888-981-7509. Your hosts are Bryan Abercrombie and Samuel Sanchez. Bryan has been practicing law for 18 years and is board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization in the area of family law. Sam has been practicing for 13 years, is licensed in both Texas and Florida, and is a certified mediator. This podcast is for informational purposes only, and all views are the opinion of the hosts. It is not designed to provide legal advice for your particular legal matter, and it should not replace the advice of competent counsel. Welcome, and we hope you enjoy the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. Good morning, and welcome to the Top Texas Lawyers Podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Abercrombie, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. Samuel Sanchez. Sam, how you doing?
Not too bad. The chips to your salsa, Bryan. The chips to your salsa, man.
The syrup to my pancakes.
There you go. I like that even better. I like that better.
Anyway, it's breakfast time, I guess, right? So anyway, what we wanted to talk about today, I guess, is some divorce and or custody war stories, right? Some stuff we've seen in 31 years that you and I have combined have been doing this crazy on this crazy train, as Ozzy Osbourne would say.
Yeah, doing this crazy dance, tangoing on. I think every lawyer, Bryan, I think this is one of those things that as attorneys we always get questioned about. We talk to friends, family, acquaintances, and they're always like, so, what's it like? Do you like being a lawyer? What's the craziest thing that's happened to you in or out of the courtroom? And I think any lawyer that you talk to is going to have a bunch, but I feel like we've got a pretty good list going of things that we can talk about to tell clients like, hey.
We've got a few. We've got, you can always hold court at any cocktail party if you just start telling stories about crazy things that have happened in the courtroom or with cases or whatever. And to the extent we're going to protect the innocent, so we're not going to name any specifics about any cases. We'll just be kind of general about, what we've seen, what we've observed over the years. But in the short term, do we have any celebrity divorces we want to talk about?
Well, let's give you some updates on ones that we're following. Obviously, Dr. Dre's madhouse that's happening in California is super interesting. The news is saying that Mama walked off with $40,000 plus in cash from the studio, plus a whole undetermined amount of cash from the house, and any other stash place he would have put a coffee can in the backyard. Wherever it was, she found it and took it. Right. And I think it's really because, if you're on that side of a prenuptial agreement like she is, somebody probably pretty talented, wrote a rock solid one, and, you're looking around going like, that really cuts me out of a lot. Cash is still one of those things that miraculously disappears during divorces. And right. So apparently she's chasing that down.
Yeah. And the other thing, I've looked at this Jeff Bezos divorce a little bit, and he went from being on the, top Forbes top richest person list, top 10 richest people in the world list, to he and his ex-wife being on the top 10 Forbes richest people in the world list in one fell swoop, right?
They're tied for second and third. No, that's been a crazy one too. Obviously there's so much of those assets that are going to be distributed. She said, I think she'd signed up with Bill Gates' foundation to donate quite a substantial amount. And even after that, she'll still have more than she can spend in probably 2 or 3 lifetimes. So it's pretty impressive.
And I think people like the celebrity divorces because they're salacious and there's a lot of stuff in there. And, you've got, Jenna Dewan and the guy from Magic Mike.
Channing Tatum. And
it's salacious, and, the pretty people are getting divorced, and, you get to see the ugly side of that. But, divorce in and of itself is a tricky concept, and it's also heartbreaking for families. And, we don't need to make light of it, but I guess you get a little jaded after doing this for a number of years, right?
Yeah, you really do. But, in that, I think we really, at least you and I, we spend a lot of time really trying to not only sympathize, but empathize with our clients, what's going on, what they're going through, to make sure that, their concerns are addressed and their families are protected. Because a good lawyer, that's really what they want to do anyways. But another thing in the corner before we move off of this, in the news is something that'll tie into one of my war stories is Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. Obviously, they finished the property part of their divorce, but they're still in these custody battles, right? Over, concerns over alcoholism, drug abuse, emotional state, well-being, access to the kids. And these are some of the pieces. I think they're really illustrative of a divorce that can go on and on and on and not end. I mean, now she's filed motions to recuse the judge. These are things that sometimes it's legal strategy. You kind of look at it and go like, I just haven't gotten what I want from this court. How can I put it in a better light, put it in a different position to give me a chance to get some of what I want? And I really think that that's kind of what's happening on that side, because obviously it's been going on for a while and she was fine when she was getting her way, but now it seems like she's has things that aren't being considered the way she wants, and she's like, this judge has got to go. So it's a really interesting case.
And I think people, we cover celebrity divorces because everybody knows who those people are, but it's one of those things where it is a family breaking up in a lot of instances, and there are, you can look at those things as kind of examples of kind of the craziness that can come about in family law cases. And it's also, I think, sometimes a good lesson on kind of things you need to look at and prepare for in the event that you're in that unfortunate situation. Because yes, I mean, people in Hollywood don't live in the real world. I mean, let's be honest, but they do have real world problems in a lot of instances. So they're fighting over Ferraris and massive and yachts and massive bank accounts, but it's still sometimes the same principles that fall into all of this stuff. So
yeah, all stuff and family, and two things that I think everybody can relate to is everything you've worked for your whole life and the things most important to you and dear to your family. So right. Clearly they're dealing with them. So
let's get to it. I mean, you got any crazy stories? I remember one. You remember the one with the service and the disguise in the courthouse and the that whole thing?
Oh yeah. So that's so to give you a little background, there's some cases that'll be done in 90 days. There's some cases that'll stretch on for years and years, and this just happened to be one of these cases to where one of the parties was in an emotional state where they were just really having some difficulty acknowledging the fact that the relationship was going to end on terms that they didn't really like. And, that set up for an interesting situation where there was a hotly contested issue. We had tried to get this person served because they were, in different states and they had planes and all kinds of stuff. But through this process, trying to get this person served, they had been evading service for this hearing. And so, but it's amazing. It's amazing, Brian, how sometimes people, their own curiosity is what gets them in the worst situations. And this opposing party just, could not help but want to see what was going to happen at this hearing, even though this person had never been served. And so, I'm in the courthouse, I'm walking back and forth, I'm trying to convince my client not to have a mild panic attack because nothing's going to happen that day because we weren't able to effectuate service, even though there was this super hot issue that we needed to have the court address. And as I'm on the cell phone talking to the process server, right, I'm walking down the hall and I just happen to walk by this person with these big dark sunglasses in a disguise, pulled the sunglasses down to kind of look at me to be like, you can't recognize me. And I'm like, holy crap, that's the opposing party. And so I tell the
Wasn't there a wig and a baseball cap? And
there was a wig and there was like a full-on disguise. I mean, and so obviously, being on the phone with the process server was a stroke of luck because I just said, hey, I need you up here in the courtroom. And, what ensued was true chaos, Brian, true chaos. I mean, this person's running around the courthouse. The process server is chasing her around the courthouse, trying to give this paperwork to this person. Person jumps in the elevator with these people as the doors are just about to close. And the process server throws the paperwork at her in the elevator and says, you've been served. I mean, finally that person realized like, okay, I'm already here, came into the courtroom in the full disguise. It was quite the spectacle. I can't lie. Like it was something I have yet to experience again. Hopefully that was a one and done, but yeah, that was a wild one, Bryan. That was a wild one.
Yeah, I mean, I had a wild case. We were in the middle of a mediation. We have, the opposing side is making a bunch of allegations about violence and different things, and my client had a bit of a hot temper, and so in the middle of the mediation, we're not getting anywhere with the mediation. It was about to break up for the day, and my client says, "Oh, I'll be back in a minute," and I assumed he was going to the restroom, and I kind of waited for him, and he didn't come back. And then the mediator comes down the hall and says, "Hey, you need to get your client out of the other room." And the client went into the other room and started wagging his finger in the face of his ex-wife and her attorney, and telling him how awful they were and what he was going to do, and talking about their anatomies and different things. And so I went in there to get him, and I went in to try to get in between him and his wife. And he pushed me into a set of double glass doors, and I finally was able to get him out of the room. And he goes out, and the mediator says, "Okay, we can't do this. Mediation's over. This can't be happening." So he immediately, and this mediation was taking place across the street from the courthouse. So he goes out in the middle of the street and starts yelling and screaming about whatever was going on at 5:00. When all the courthouse personnel were leaving the courthouse and going to their cars. And so everybody at the courthouse is watching this spectacle take place on the street. So I finally get him out of the street and get him into his car and get him to go home. And then I had to get off of that case because it was just, basically.
Yeah, you're like, I need to be off. I need to go. I got to let you do this.
They were going to call the mediator as a witness, which is almost never done. And, all kinds of stuff. And unfortunately he got his temper get the best of him. And, he unfortunately basically made their case for their worst fears about him because we couldn't keep it under control. You got to expect that bad things are going to be said about you if you get in the most heavily contested, custody case. And it's hard, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, people do go to extremes sometimes.
Well, and it never, taking that kind of action, whether you're going to show up in disguise and try to avoid service, or you're going to, behave that way, it's never going to put you in a better position. And I know it's hard when you're emotionally charged, right? You're in this situation where you're like, I just can't let go. But if you can't put that aside and try to at least apply common sense, you're going to really put yourself in harm's way. I'll tell you, Bryan, so that kind of leads me into another story. So in a previous life, obviously I did criminal law. And, it's not like we're always dealing with the most reputable people in the world when you're doing criminal law, right? But we were going to
law as the criminals.
Yeah, look, alleged criminals, okay? But I will tell you, we were handling this aggravated assault case. I was walking out of the courtroom after just a short hearing with the judge. It was just kind of evidentiary. It wasn't even before trial. But the DA or the assistant DA had really been jawing and like tearing this guy down in this hearing, talking about how he's a terrible person, how, there were all these concerns about people's well-being and personal safety. And this guy was taking it pretty personal. And I was like, you could tell he's getting agitated. And, when some people get mad and they're kind of pale skinned, they get all flustered and their neck gets red. He was like, I was like, are you okay?
Popping out.
Oh, yeah. Up here on the forehead. And I was like, are you okay? Just like, calm down, take some breaths. And he's like, man, that guy is just lying about me. And I don't like it when people lie about me. I mean, that's just one of the things, like my pet peeve. And I was like, well, you're just going to have to swallow it, because that's what this whole process is about. So this short hearing ends, and I walk over to talk to the ADA and say basically like, hey, whatever we're going to do. And the ADA is like, I'm not giving this guy any break. Like, I really have a personal dislike for this guy. And if I can see him behind bars, I will. And I was like, all right, well, I guess we're going to move forward to trial. And it just so happens, and this is one of the things since this incident in my career, I've always tried to make sure I do not let my client leave when the opposing counsel and the opposing party leave. Like, there's no shoulder walking. Okay.
I got a story about that one too.
And so we're walking out of the courtroom, and he's shoulder to shoulder with this ADA, just jawing, just telling him, like, hey, I think you're a bleepity bleep mother effing, and I hope you get, one day if I see you on the street, I'm gonna kick your ass. And I'll tell you what, that ADA, not to, he was feeling pretty good, about like, hey, I'm in the courthouse, there's bailiffs. And he was like, I tell you what, you ever get squirrely, you jump. And that was about the time we hit the doors to walk out of the courtroom. And this guy whipped around and grabbed that guy. I always wondered why they called, our ties neckties. This guy proved it. He grabbed that guy by the tie and just commenced to like punching and choking and dragging this guy around. And I was like, it happened so fast. One, you never expect that in a courtroom because it's a professional atmosphere and there's police officers everywhere. But I'm telling you what, within seconds, he had this guy on the ground. And before I could do anything, there were deputies swarming, tackling him. All I could do was basically pull his spouse away and say, like, clear the area so that these officers can take care of what's happening. But I was like, unbelievable. So if you don't think that we pled that case out, we did because but yeah,
to screw up your case and one.
Oh my God, I told him afterwards he got up, he was getting arrested. I was like, we're gonna have to plead your case out and I'll find out about posting your new bond, because I was like, what are you thinking? Like, where something shut off in his brain in that moment that was a good idea. But it happens.
Well, I had a buddy of mine that was trying a protective order case over in probably shouldn't say the county, but he was trying a protective order case, and he was representing the wife. She gets off the elevator, she walks up to him, says, I don't want to pursue this. We've reconciled. I don't want to pursue this. And the husband comes up and I don't want to pursue this anymore either. So like he's like, okay, well, we have to go in there and tell the judge. So they go in there and they get in front of the judge and they oh, this just got out and this is a big mistake. We don't want to pursue it. We're not, there's no family violence here or anything like that. We're sorry. Basically, we want it dismissed. Okay. Judge dismisses the case. They go, off into the sunset on, holding hands and, singing love songs or whatever else. Well, they go and they get on the elevator and somewhere between the 10th floor and the first floor, something must have happened because they got into a fist fight brawl on the elevator. And the elevator's doors open down at the bottom. The bailiffs have to jump on them. They're fighting on the elevator bay, and they both end up getting arrested at the courthouse when they were down there to try to dismiss their protective order. So I don't know what happened, but they got into a fist fight on the elevator between floors 10 and floor 1.
That's not a lot of time, Brian. Yeah, you're talking about maybe 20 seconds from happy to really not liking each other again. I don't know.
And you should joke about that sort of thing about family violence and stuff like that, but just some of the craziest stuff comes out of these cases. And another situation is not family violence that I had a contested custody case one time, and this is where social media comes back to bite you. I'm in there and we're making an allegation that the wife is drinking around the kids. And so wife gets up on the stand and swears up and down, I don't drink around the kids. I've never drink around the kids. I don't do that. My kids are my world, blah, blah, blah. I don't do that. And so before the hearing, my client had showed me his wife's Facebook page. And on the Facebook page, there are some photos, as people post photos on Facebook of fun times they're having. So I get her up on the stand. I start asking her, are you absolutely sure you don't drink around this child? Oh, absolutely. We don't drink around. I don't drink around the child. So I pull back put up the picture on the little easel there in the courtroom. And I say, okay, who's this in this picture? Oh, that's me. Is that your son right there? Yeah, you're holding your son. Yeah. What's that little can in your hand right there? That looks like a Budweiser. Is that a Budweiser you're holding in your hand there? And then she's like, oh, well, yeah. And then she starts trying to think on her feet, then eventually she tries to say that she's holding it for somebody else. I'm like, you're on a boat, right? It's just you and a couple of people on this boat, right?
Hey, yeah. Brian, that was my kid's beer. All right. That's my kid's beer.
Holding the beer for the toddler, I guess. But it's one of those things where you don't, the warning sign, I guess, is don't talk in absolutes when you get down into the courthouse. In this, I don't know that she was a particularly bad mother, but don't talk into an absolute of saying I never have ever drink around my children. And it's horrible that somebody might drink around a child. Give me a break. Don't play holier than thou whenever you just like kind of impugn your own credibility when you do that.
Well, and I'll give you one, Bryan, that's kind of, sort of similar to that. But I would tell you, one of the things I always tell my clients and their families, right? Because everybody always wants to come to trial. Once we get to trial, you've put a lot of time and energy and money and effort and emotion into getting there. Your family is there to support you. And so they want to be in the gallery, kind of listening to what happens in trial, listening to the testimony, especially if they're not witnesses. So we're at trial in this, county. It's a pretty big trial. The gallery is pretty packed, and families on the front row. And so I had told my client, like, it was a really, really well done on both sides. I mean, everybody had presented a tremendous amount of evidence. The court had really kind of managed the process extremely well, even though it was a very emotionally charged trial. And we get to the point where he's going to render, and he says, I'm going to go ahead and render now. I don't even have to take it under advisement, which is rare, as you and I both know, for judges. A lot of times they want to sit down, they want to ponder it, they want to review stuff. But he was like, I have a good handle on it. I saw everything. I'm just going to go ahead and make my ruling from the bench right now. Well, the courtroom's packed. And so I tell my client, as I lean over, I whisper in his ear, I said, no matter what happens, no matter what this judge says, I don't want you to freak out. I don't want you to scream and yell. I want you to just listen to it. If it's positive for you, great. If it's negative for you, we'll deal with it. It's not the end of the world. We'll try to figure out our next steps, but just, be calm. And he was like, okay, I'll do my best. So judge stands up there, says, go ahead and both parties rise. And here's what I'm going to do. And rules in our favor, 100%. Every single thing that we had asked for, we got. And instantly the opposing party lets out this just blood curdling shriek. And the judge, like, they got these gavels, and you think it's just, like in TV where they're slamming the hammer and saying order. But this judge was like, wailing on his gavel, and basically said, I will have order in this court, or I will hold you in contempt. And from the gallery, this person's relative jumped up and said, that is a bullshit order. And I promise, it was like, like those E.F. Hutton commercials back in, I'm going to date myself, but it was like everybody would stop and listen. Like, it was like
everybody
silent,
listened.
like no one, you couldn't hear anybody breathe. And the judge just kind of sat back, and all of a sudden, deputies flood the courtroom and tackle this lady, pin her to the ground, and the judge says, I'm holding you in contempt. You're going to be jailed until I determine that I want to let you out of jail. And everybody was just like, he said, at the end of this, he said, anybody who utters one word about anything that's going on right now will also be held in contempt. So I will just tell you, as friends and family, you want to be there to support. You can, obviously once you're out in the hallway or out in the parking lot, you want to express your outrage in relation to, or your positivity about how great it was. I would just encourage you to remember that judges have the patience of a gnat a lot of times. And so you put yourself in a situation like that, and you can expect bad things to happen. And then that was a bad day for somebody, really.
I mean, and the problem with, I had a judge tell me one time that, these family law cases are usually good people, but they're in a terrible situation, and it brings out the worst in people. You got criminal cases, you got bad people trying to act their best. And in family cases, you got good people acting at their worst. So I think that's been a really good rule to follow, throughout my career. I had a probate case one time that I was involved in that, it's a little bit different than criminal or family, but the lady involved in the case, she was under a guardianship, and we were the law firm I was working for was appointed the temporary guardian, and she had some brain injury, and she had received a rather large settlement. And the reason why we were appointed as the guardian on the case by the trust company was because all of her money was held in trust, but she started doing crazy things like dating the wrong men, the wrong men. And then the men would convince her that she needed a limousine. So that and granted, she had a lot of money, but she didn't have limousine money. The men had convinced her she needed a private plane. She had a lot of money, but not private plane money. So she's calling the trust company, yelling and screaming at them, I want my money. I need to buy a limousine, to try to keep these men around. And unfortunately, she was meeting these men on the internet. And
what?
The
internet isn't a good thing, Bryan?
They had various criminal backgrounds. A lot of them were scammers, and different things like that. So, I mean, they would have bilked her out of all of her money in probably a span of about, 3 or 4 months. And luckily the trust company saw some very, very strange transactions, and then her calling up and demanding money for limousines and different things, kind of put them on notice that, hey, we're dealing with a lady that, had a traumatic brain injury, so she's not quite there, and we ended up having to get her round the clock care, and these caretakers would have to shoo she'd still be on the internet in the middle of the night, and these caretakers would have to shoo these guys that would come knocking on the window. You'd have to either call the police or...
It's like she's a teenage girl again, like people putting ladders up to the window to come and sneak them in.
This poor woman was, 50 years old, and there was just an unfortunate situation all the way around. It's just that she wouldn't, the problem is if the caretakers weren't around, it got out of control really, really fast in terms of, first the medication would stop, then she's out on the street, honestly barking at the moon, or, running around, streaking through the neighborhood. It was pretty
What's
bad.
wrong with that? I mean, that's kind of just the fun times on
Friday
right
night
here.
at your house, I'm sure, but that's just Friday night. But no, it was a bad situation. But I mean, they don't teach you. That was when I first got out of law school. So, they don't teach you how to deal with that, that situation in law school. And I had to, call her up, talk her off the ledge, and those are the kinds of things that they don't, they teach you the law, they teach you legal theory. They even teach you how to deal with clients to some extent, and how to explain things to clients, but they don't teach you how to explain logic to, a person who's mentally ill. So
no, that's always tough. I always tell people, like, you can't talk common sense to crazy. It just doesn't work. They don't understand it.
You'll never convince a crazy person that they're crazy. I've had a case where I was representing some children, and I was representing the mom, and dad got an unfavorable ruling from the judge. So he proceeded to picket the courthouse I think he was out there for probably 2 months, standing out in front of the courthouse, holding up signs about how the judge didn't care about kids. It was a bad situation. I felt really bad for the kids, very embarrassing for the children. They were getting into teenagers, and then this person got some news media attention on when he was picketing the courthouse, because he was the only person out there holding up his sign. So eventually a reporter came and asked him, courthouse reporter came and asked him, hey, what's going on? And he told his story, which actually didn't fare well for him the next time he was in front of that judge. But
yeah, no, they have, they're elephants, man. They have long memories. They remember that stuff. I will tell you, I got it going for you though. I will tell you a deposition story. And this is something that, both you and I in our previous lives spent a lot of time raising young attorneys, teaching them how to practice law, how to behave in the courtroom, in and out of the courtroom. But I will tell you that depositions are one of those times where there's not a bailiff. There's usually a court reporter. There's no judge. It's you, the opposing counsel, your client, and the other client.
Oh, yeah.
And I will tell you, they can get really heated. They go really long sometimes. People's patience wear thin, but even between attorneys. And I will tell you, now I wasn't at this deposition, but this attorney relayed this happening. So basically, they're in there, and the other attorney is making what our attorney felt were improper objections. Basically in a deposition, there's only certain types of objections that you're supposed to make, but this attorney was treating it like trial and just making all the kinds of objections you could possibly make at trial. And so they started having this dispute between the attorneys. A question would be issued, an objection would be answered. The attorney who issued the question would say that's inappropriate. The other one would say, you don't know what you're talking about. You're an idiot. And so it started to get really heated between the attorneys, where the clients were like, these guys are having problems. So it got so bad that these guys got nose to nose talking about they were going to kick each other's ass in front of two clients and a court reporter. The court reporter had to stand up and get in between these attorneys and tell them, you guys need to take a break and we're suspending it. I don't care what you guys do after this, but I'm leaving. And so this attorney came back and came in my office and sitting there. I was like, how'd the deposition go? He was like, I don't know that it went so good. And I'm like, well, the client sent me an email saying he wanted to schedule a call with me, like, fill me in. Like, was it just, and he started kind of recounting, and he said, finally it got so bad where this guy called me a fucking idiot. And I just popped up and I was like, I'll kick your ass right now. He came around the table and I went around the table. We were there like, because if it wasn't for the court reporter, because we'd probably got in a fist fight in front of those two clients over what, and so he's like, I hate that guy. I mean, and I changed him off of that case. Obviously, I had to deal with the client, but I told him, I was like, look, in that situation, the only person who came up looking bad, obviously he looks bad too. I said, but it's you. I mean, you've lost the confidence of your client. I said, as attorneys, we're officers of the court. We're sworn to, uphold the law. And we also we swear to, behave professionally. There's professional etiquette that, the bar expects. And I'm like, you can't go threaten and have a fist fight at a deposition. That's just not how we practice law. Not the person that you want to be, nor the person or the reputation that you want to have. But I get it, because there are just times, Bryan, where there's lawyers on the other side where you're just like, I just cannot stand that person. And if it wasn't, if there weren't rules, if it was the Wild West, boy, we'd meet out in the street. We'd meet out in the street and line up, 40 yards apart and see what happens. But
well, my first firm I ever worked for, they had a bit of a hothead attorney who would get into fights with opposing counsel all the time. And, they're down in the courthouse having a hearing over discovery. And he's standing there and, the judge or the other attorneys talking about, hey, you needed to bring these documents to court. Where are they? We're supposed to, I want this, I want that. And he finally turns and staring at the guy, pulls his keys out of his pocket and says, the fucking documents you want are in the fucking car. And he threw his keys, hit the other lawyer with his car keys. Judge gets, starts banging the gavel, like you said, gets in an uproar. And he ended up costing him a night in jail and about $5,000. So,
yeah, judges take it serious. And it's one of those things, Bryan. Like I would tell you, there was a different time in life in law, right? There still are those attorneys who we call it the dog and pony show, right? They're just going to come in and they're going to scream and yell and bang on the table and make all this much to do, and it doesn't affect anything, because very few matters go before a jury. And even if you're behaving that way in front of a jury, you're probably going to get rebuked and reprimanded by the court for behaving that way. But some attorneys still believe like that theatrical response is the way to behave. And so when you run across that in a courtroom, it makes it very difficult if you don't behave that way, because your client instantly wants to look over and say, well, the judge is going to listen to them more because they're screaming or yelling or dancing around or making a fool of themselves. And you have to, it's very difficult to explain to your client, no, the judge is actually listening to the law, listening to the facts, not how this idiot's behaving. Right. But it's really hard, and you when you're dealing with that, to get in those situations, it's, we raised a lot of young attorneys, and that was always something that drove me crazy. I mean, because I experienced it, like as a young attorney, you run into an old guard attorney who was used to practicing law that way. Everybody thought they were Matlock, right? Everybody thought they were, Jerry Spence,
whatever.
Exactly, coming in, and they were looking for that aha moment, like Perry Mason used to, like, that's the lie, Your Honor. No, it doesn't happen that way. Not in the real world. But, there were some attorneys who still behave that way. And so it would really throw attorneys off their game. And what I would tell them, I was like, there's a side to the practice of law that's just as much psychological as it is intellectual and physical, right? The way you manifest yourself, and both you and I have done jury trials apart and together. And we know, Bryan, that the way a client behaves can absolutely affect the outcome. The way they sit, the way they, huff when somebody says anything, or sit back in their chair and fling themselves back and talk about how, it's a lie, or they're constantly in your ear, or writing furiously when things are doing. Judges pay attention to that, and so do juries. And I'll give you a good example of that as kind of a good war story. You and I were in a trial. I'll take you back. And these two people, obviously, I don't know how they ever had children together, because there was no love or like between them.
Nope.
And our client felt like the best way to proceed, and this was a jury trial, mind you, the best way to proceed in front of this trial tribunal and the judge was to show as much disdain for this other person as possible. I mean, to just huff and haw and sigh, and decided that he was on the stand, right? We let him take the stand. He's sitting there, we're going through questions, and then the opposing side is going to get an opportunity to do the same thing. And that's the legal proceeding. That's the fight. Gets up on the stand, and I don't know, Bryan, do you remember what happened?
Well, I know he threw some exhibits back at the opposing side.
It was great. I mean, if I could see, I'm sure if there was a camera on you and I, like, there was no way we could keep a straight face, because, I mean, basically he takes the paperwork or the exhibit, he sits down, he looks at it, And rather than handing it back, he just basically flings it at him. And they fall to the floor, right? The other side picks them up, very graciously, and the judge jumps out of her seat practically, or jumps out of his seat and is like, hey, you're not going to behave that way in this courtroom. But, and me and you, what can we do? I mean, your client's on the stand. It's not like you can jump up and go, Your Honor. I mean, I think we did ask for a recess at that point to like take him out into the hallway and yell at him a little bit. Yeah. Yeah, you can. I mean, the moment is past. It's in the jury's mind. It's in the judge's mind. I mean, and the thing that I would always suggest to clients that are going through the legal process is, remember, as hard as it is to show your best self, that's really what you want people to see. If you want somebody to do something for you, it's very rare that salt gets you further than sugar. It's extremely rare in the courtroom. I mean,
that was the case where we talked to the jurors afterwards, and they all harkened back to that moment and just said the level of hatred, we thought was off-putting. The level of hatred that this guy had for this mom was off-putting, and that's why we decided the way we decided.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a terrible situation, a terrible outcome for that particular person, but when you look back to that one moment, I mean, we could trace it back, and it was very easy to sit down with the client and say, like, well, here's kind of what went and what didn't. So, and these are the things that make it challenging, I think, Bryan, in family law as a practitioner, is that you and I both know, like, there's the law, and there's going to be some legal issues that are pretty clear cut. But in any family issue, it's usually going to revolve around a very fact-intensive inquiry. When you're talking about he said, she said, because very rarely are there a whole lot of witnesses in a house between a husband and a wife, or between family interactions, right? It's usually going to be a few people. And so everybody's perception matters, and the way it's presented matters. So it can make things extremely complicated. You got to put your best self forward.
Absolutely. And I think that's good. You got any other juicy stories you want to tell us?
The last one is, I guess, as to kind of wrap it up, I will tell you, and it's a sad one, but I give it as, really a cautionary tale. There are going to be plenty of times in your life where days are going to be dark, right? And a lot of times going through a legal process is one of those. Because there's no more, stressors that you could put on yourself. Your finances are going to be tested. Your emotional stability is going to be tested. The love that you share with your family is potentially going to be tested. People who you think you trusted at one time are going to come out and speak ill of you or against your interests. And all those things put people in very difficult and stressful situations. But I will tell you that, we had a client who had been in a physical altercation with this other party's paramour. Okay, it got really bad. There were stitches. I mean, it was bad. And through this entire process, this individual seemed absolutely calm. There were protective orders issued in relation to no contact, but in legal proceedings, there's still going to be times where you're all in the same space. You have to be. Everybody gets an opportunity to present. So it wasn't really like the Zoom world we're in now, where you would put people in different like virtual rooms. And I will tell you, like, the fear that was spoken of was palpable in this hearing in relation to what was going to happen in a finality. And, as much as I advise the client to take the high road, to really understand that, sometimes the legal world moves slow. And what that means is it could take you, months, years to get what you want, or to change things from where they were because of bad decisions to a place where it's better for you and your family. But it can happen. It does happen. A smart lawyer will get you there. But, self-help is never going to be one of those things that's going to make things work. And what ended up happening was this particular client went to try to discuss things with the other party. He was under a protective order, meaning a protective order in Texas means he can't get within a certain feet from, residence, school, place of employment, or the individual themselves, unless it's by accident. Like, you show up in the same grocery store, they're not going to get it. You can't know they're going to be there, but you got to clear out. Anyways, he went to the house, knocked on the door. Boyfriend, mama, tell him, you better get out of here. This is Texas, and we know how to protect our property and ourselves. He wouldn't leave. He got pretty belligerent. He ended up breaking a window. He got shot through the door by the opposing party. And now, obviously, he was able to recover. But, it's a cautionary tale for the situations that we find ourselves in as attorneys. I mean, there are tons of people that you and I both know that, have their lives threatened, have their offices shot up or firebombed. And, it's a crazy world. It's a crazy world. And when you talk about this worldwide pandemic and, the political unrest, these are all things that add to the volatility of this legal process. And so the only thing I would tell you is, luckily, everybody made it out of that. It was going to be a number of years before that individual was ever going to be able to kind of figure out a way, if there was one, to repair what had happened, both physically to himself and then really to kind of repair the relationship with his children because of what had transpired. So, the last moment I would tell you, obviously, is not the funny one, but I really do want people to know, like, these war stories, everybody's got one or 10 or 20. But that's the one I always try to tell clients, like, self-help is never going to be the way. Hire a lawyer, get into the courtroom, have a fair judge, kind of listen to the facts and make some decisions, and you'll always end up in a better place.
And every one of these stories has a real person behind it and a real situation and a real life that's in tatters because of bad decision making, really. And that's you got to be in charge of your decisions when you're in any kind of legal process. You've got to make sure you understand and you're making sound and rational decisions.
Agreed, brother. Agreed. So plenty more war stories to come, I'm sure. We got many years to practice, but those are probably the top 10. They were in the top 10 list for sure.
Yeah. If you want to check us out, you can check us out at www.astxlegal.com. And if you want to reach me, my number is 281-374-4741. And I'm out of the Woodlands in Houston, Texas. And Sam, where are you?
Well, I'm up in the DFW area, Fort Worth and Dallas. But we'll go wherever we need to go. You want to reach me directly, it's 469-884-7181. And you can reach me at ssanchez@astxlegal.com.
And we've got a handy dandy divorce guidebook. I don't like using the words handy dandy, but we got a handy guide that we got. We were real excited about it. Honestly, we've been working on it for a while, and it's designed to be a guidebook about the divorce process and kind of give you some ideas about things to do and what to expect. I mean, it's a handy guidebook, and we're real happy. We're real proud of it. We're going to be launching that thing pretty soon, so be on the lookout for our divorce guidebook.
Yeah, not only that, I hear there's some swag, like they're coming up with some swag for the podcast. So
right.
That'll be something that maybe, we'll put out there too.
All right. Yeah. There might be some shirts on the way or whatever, right?
Yeah. So interesting time, but yeah, you stay safe, Bryan. And, I guess we'll look to talk it soon.
All right, sir. You be good, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the Top Texas Lawyers podcast. If you would like a consultation with either Bryan or Sam, please call 1-888-981-7509 or visit us on the web at astxlegal.com. Once again, that's astxlegal.com. Thank you very much.